Howard's first love committed suicide. Just because I posted a WeChat moments about the joy of having a baby boy. In a fit of rage, he forced me to have an abortion. We can have another baby if this one is gone. There's only one Maisie. Looking at this man who had shared the same bed with me for 3 years, I felt a chill all over my body. I sneered, since the baby is gone, then you can get out too. I waited for Howard at home for a long time. The elaborate candlelight dinner on the dining table had already gone cold. There was still the pregnancy test strip I had just used in the afternoon lying on the coffee table in front of me. I was pregnant. After 3 years of marriage, I finally had a baby with Howard. I couldn't wait to share this joy with him. But it was already 1 o'clock in the morning now. Howard hadn't answered my calls or replied to my messages. In the past, he would always tell me in advance if he had to work overtime because he was afraid I'd worry. What had happened today? The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. I couldn't hold it in after all and called Howard's assistant. Is President Howard still busy? Sister Irene, President Howard should be in the hospital at the moment. Hearing the word hospital, my breath caught and my head buzzed. My first thought was whether something had happened to Howard. Miss Maisie tried to commit suicide and she's still in critical condition. President Howard is staying at the hospital right now. Maisie, Howard's first love. She was a woman who had been extremely hostile to me since the first time I saw her. After hanging up the phone, I sat and waited for another 2 hours, but there was still no news from Howard. Outside the window, a violent storm had started at some point. The sound of lightning splitting the sky made my heart ache. Just before dawn, I still went to the hospital worriedly. When I found Maisie's ward, the people inside were talking. I almost succeeded. Why did you save me? Through the glass, I saw that Maisie's left wrist was wrapped with thick bandages. She was lying on the bed, pale-faced, crying hysterically. Howard almost instantly pulled her into his arms, and the pity in his eyes was obvious. He gently rubbed the top of her head. His tone was gentle, as if he were coaxing a child. It's okay. Everything is over. Looking at this harmonious scene in front of me, I lost the courage to push the door open. Unconsciously, I placed my hand on my stomach, where a little life was growing. At this moment, it was throbbing with pain, perhaps because I was too tired from last night. Howard, could you ask Irene to have the baby aborted? My soul was hit hard. I looked up in disbelief. Was Maisie crazy? In the ward, Maisie was gripping Howard's lapels tightly with both hands, looking at him with an almost pleading look in her eyes. Tears were streaming down her face. Irene did it on purpose. Knowing that I can never have children again in my life, she still posted on WeChat moments to disgust me. By the end of her speech, Maisie was already sobbing uncontrollably and even started to pull at the bandages on her wrist in a self-harming way. What's the point of me living? I might as well be dead. Okay, I promise you. The words almost slipped out of his mouth. Howard anxiously grabbed her hands, and his determined eyes were like a sharp dagger, stabbing into my heart until it bled. I felt like I could hardly breathe. I ran out of the hospital as if fleeing. This baby that I had been looking forward to for so long, but his father didn't want him. Although it was just an unformed blood clot now, but I still felt so sad for him. I tossed and turned in bed, unable to fall asleep. As soon as I closed my eyes, Howard's cold and indifferent eyes would appear in front of me. Before I knew it, it was already past 7 o'clock in the morning. I simply got out of bed, put on a coat, and went to the balcony to get some fresh air. I lived in a large flat with a great view. I could clearly see City First Hospital. Among those little lit-up squares, Howard and Maisie were staying in one of them. Staring at it for a long time, my thoughts couldn't help but drift away. Howard and I had been in a relationship for 1 year and married for 3 years. I had only seen Maisie a handful of times. The first time was when Howard and I had just gotten together. He took me to meet his friends. In the private room, everyone was chatting and laughing. The atmosphere was pleasant and harmonious, except Maisie, who was gloomy. When our eyes occasionally met, the look she gave me was full of hostility that confused me. At first, I comforted myself that it was just an illusion. Until she turned the lazy Susan when I was picking up food, criticized me when I was speaking, and even my inability to eat spicy food became my shortcoming. I finally realized that she really didn't like me. On the way back, I asked about Maisie. Howard said casually, "She's just spoiled. Don't take it to heart." I didn't dig deeper at that time, but I wasn't too happy about it anyway. Perhaps sensing my mood, I never saw Maisie again at any of my gatherings after that, including our wedding. The second time was on a late night after we got married. Maisie barged into my house, reeking of alcohol, crying and throwing herself into Howard's arms, complaining coquettishly, "Didn't you say you'd take care of me forever? Didn't you say you wouldn't abandon me? Howard, what am I to you?" I was stunned on the spot, like a deceived outsider, pitiful and ridiculous. Under my questioning, Howard talked about his past with Maisie for the first time. He and Maisie had grown up together since childhood, a childhood sweetheart pair. During a winter vacation in college, Maisie came to the city where Howard was. She pestered Howard to take her to skate on the Swan Lake. Unexpectedly, an accident happened, the ice broke and Maisie fell into the frozen lake and almost drowned. It was very cold that day. When Maisie was pulled out, her whole body was frozen stiff. Although she was saved later, her fertility was severely affected by the cold. Howard took all the blame on himself, believing that it was because he hadn't taken good care of Maisie that she ended up like this. Speaking of this, he hugged his head in pain. If I had stopped her when she insisted on going, if I had noticed her the moment she left my sight, then, would all the tragedies have not happened? This sense of self-blame and guilt forced him to keep being nice to Maisie, coaxing her and spoiling her. But he knew clearly that what he was doing was just atoning for his sins. He urgently explained to me, "Irene, you have to believe me. I haven't done anything to betray you. I've only loved you from the beginning to the end." I was really angry that day. I don't think any woman can accept that her husband is so considerate to a strange woman other than herself. Moreover, this woman still had fantasies about him. After that, we had a long Cold War. Howard promised me over and over again that he would draw a clear line from Maisie. He started to be extra nice to me to make up for the harm he had done to me. However, it had only been half a year. He actually wanted to kill our baby again for Maisie. This made me have to suspect that all his kindness was hiding something. At 9 o'clock in the morning, I walked into the study. Howard didn't deserve to be the father of my child. I was going to divorce him. Once the seed of doubt is planted, there will always be some clues to be found in the past memories. I remembered that Howard had a spare phone. I had accidentally seen it in the drawer of the study. On a whim, I tried to look for it and, surprisingly, I actually found it. It showed how much I had trusted him before, which made him so unscrupulous with me. Howard had told me that this phone was for contacting important clients and asked me not to touch it. I was so silly to believe him. But the moment I opened WeChat, there was only one contact on the list, and the avatar was Maisie. How ironic. Holding back my disgust, I scrolled through all their chat records. The records started 5 years ago, a year earlier than me. "Are you really going to marry her?" "Yes, this is the condition for you to stay by my side." "What about me?" "Don't worry, I'll take care of you for a lifetime." "It ended yesterday, Howard, I'm in so much pain. I can't convince myself to accept that you have a baby with another woman. Don't think of me after I'm gone. Live well. Farewell, my dear Howard." Howard didn't respond here. I guess he was in a hurry to call her. No wonder I couldn't get in touch with him on WeChat usually. It turned out that he was chatting affectionately with his first love on his alternate account. There was so much content that it took me several hours to finish reading it. In those messages, they were like a pair of lovers who were extremely close to each other. They would share the joys and sorrows of their daily lives with each other. Even the undergarments Maisie bought would be sent to Howard one by one for him to see and help her choose. "Howard, look, do I look good in this nightgown? Is pink better or white? You look good in anything. I like you in anything." Reading this, I couldn't help but feel a wave of nausea. Suddenly, I remembered that a few months before I got pregnant, when passing by a store, I was inspired to carefully pick out a pink lace-trimmed nightgown. I was too shy to put it on right away. I first held it up in front of the mirror, planning to try it on for Howard when he came back. Coincidentally, he pushed the door open and saw me in the nightgown. I clearly caught a glimpse of his furrowed brows as he looked me up and down with a look of disgust on his face, as if he was really unhappy. I quickly put down the dress in my hand and casually threw it into the wardrobe. I never tried this style again. I thought he was conservative and didn't like his woman to dress too seductively or revealingly. It turned out that he just didn't like me dressing like that. Thinking back to when I usually asked for his opinion when buying clothes, he was always perfunctory. My eyes were sore and uncomfortable. I put down my phone and looked up, as if only in this way could I hold back my tears. So, he married me just so that he could be with Maisie forever. Now that Maisie tried to commit suicide, he panicked and couldn't keep up the pretense anymore. I looked at the ceiling, and the smile on my lips slowly widened as the pent-up tears burst out. For years. I had loved him wholeheartedly for 4 years. In the end, I had become a joke. I don't know how long I cried, but I eventually passed out. It wasn't until there was a deafening knocking on the door outside. Irene, come out. I vaguely recognized this not so unfamiliar voice. Giselle, Maisie's mother. As for what she was here for, it was obvious. I originally didn't want to deal with her. Just after I notified the property management, I heard other neighbors who had been disturbed cursing in the corridor. Helplessly, I had to open the door. The moment Giselle saw me, her angry palm slapped over. You cruel woman. Not having slept all night made my reaction a bit slow. The burning pain on my left cheek woke me up. I immediately swung my hand back and slapped her even harder and more forcefully. You! How dare you hit me? Giselle covered her face and stared at me in disbelief. When she was about to lunge at me again, I casually picked up the fire extinguisher by the door and aimed it menacingly at her. Maisie's suicide has nothing to do with me. Giselle finally cowered. Reluctantly, she stopped in her tracks, but her mouth was still shouting even louder. Maisie saw the WeChat moments you posted and couldn't bear the stimulation, so she committed suicide. Irene, you have such a malicious heart. It serves Howard right to love my Maisie and not you, this cruel woman. If it weren't for, get out. I was so angry that my whole body was shaking, and I was about to throw the extinguisher at her. She turned pale with fear, took a step back, and still wanted to continue shouting. Fortunately, the security guards arrived in time and dragged her away. After closing the door, I hugged myself, trembling. I didn't understand what I had done wrong. Didn't I even have the right to share the joy of being pregnant on my own WeChat moments? Why were they all blaming me? Suddenly, I noticed a problem that had been overlooked. I had never added Maisie on WeChat. So where did she see the news of my pregnancy from? When Howard came back, I was applying medicine to my face in front of the mirror. His footsteps were hurried. He first went to the bedroom, searched around, and finally pushed open the bathroom door. By this time, I had just finished applying the last bit of medicine. Giselle's slap was quite hard. Not only was half of my face swollen, but there were also several glaring blood marks. Howard's gaze only lingered on my face for a brief second, and he even omitted any words of concern. Without saying a word, he grabbed my arm and dragged me out. In the chaos, the painful part of my face rubbed against his elbow. I cried out in pain, Howard, what are you doing? Let go of me. Howard ignored me. I couldn't break free, so I bit down hard on his arm. With a hiss of pain, he threw me off. After getting free, I rushed out of the room without looking back. When I came out again, I had 2 copies of the divorce agreement in my hand. I threw them hard at Howard's face. I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't wait to end my relationship with the person in front of me. Howard's gaze shifted down and landed on the divorce agreement on the ground. Then he looked up again, and a chill burst out from his deep pupils. He gritted his teeth, Maisie almost died because of you. How can you just walk away? Come with me to the hospital right now. I won't go. Howard, I'm carrying your own flesh and blood. You can't treat us like this. Finally, there was a trace of emotion in Howard's eyes. He no longer tried to grab me forcefully. Just when I thought he had a pang of conscience, his next words made me shiver all over. We can have another baby if this one is gone. There's only one Maisie. Be obedient. Once Maisie can accept it, you can have as many babies as you want. My body trembled violently, and I curled my lips bitterly. Maisie's life is a life, isn't my child's life? An impatient look gradually appeared on Howard's face. I don't want to gamble with Maisie's life on something unknown. It turns out that when the heartache reaches the extreme, it really does numb you, and you really won't cry anymore. I raised my hand and wiped my face. It was completely dry. When I looked at Howard again, I completely suppressed my emotions, and there was only coldness left in my eyes. I'll have the baby aborted. Having children with someone like you would only make me sick for the rest of my life. My tone was harsher than ever. I turned around and went back to the study to get a pen. Then I bent down to pick up the agreement on the ground and handed it to him. Sign it. Howard's face was extremely ugly. He stared at me silently for a while, then took it, didn't even look at it, but quickly signed it. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. When I went to the study just now, I had secretly called the police. The child was mine, and he had no right to decide its life or death. I used the excuse of packing my things to buy some time. The moment the knocking on the door sounded, my hanging heart finally settled. When I opened the door, it wasn't the police officers I saw, but my mother-in-law, Kylie. Come with Mom. If anyone dares to touch my grandson, I'll fight them to the death. I was a little surprised. Before I could react, Howard heard the commotion and came out of the study. He seemed surprised too. Mom, why are you here? My mother-in-law tightly grasped my arm, as if afraid that I would run away, and snorted coldly at Howard. You should ask Maisie about that. Maisie? Didn't she want me to have an abortion? My mother-in-law wanted a grandson so badly. Why did she notify her? This answer left both Howard and me stunned. My mother-in-law's face darkened. She turned around and was about to take me away. But I didn't want to go with her. Whether this child was born or not, I didn't want to have anything to do with the Howard family. Suddenly, my other hand was grabbed by Howard. His voice was low and angry. You can't take her away. I haven't settled the matter of Maisie's suicide with you yet. My body froze. I found that things were getting more and more confusing. Howard was saying this to my mother-in-law. I saw my mother-in-law's face change. What kind of tricks were they playing between mother and son? The atmosphere was at a stalemate. Both of my arms were being held tightly, and I couldn't break free no matter how hard I tried. This feeling made me really irritable. Let go of me. No, you must come with me today. She has to stay. The mother and son didn't care about my feelings at all. I was being treated like a toy, being pulled back and forth. There were already red marks around my wrists. This uncomfortable feeling made my stomach hurt more and more. It was like being pricked by needles one by one. There was also a faint flow of some wet liquid. My stomach hurt so much. I hunched my back in pain. My words finally caught their attention. Only then did they simultaneously let go of me and look at me. My mother-in-law's eyes widened in horror. Irene, what's wrong with you? My mother-in-law's shout woke Howard up. He scooped me up by the waist and rushed out. In the car, the mother and son were still blaming each other for the pulling just now. I was in so much pain that I couldn't breathe. Beads of sweat soaked my clothes, and soon I passed out from the pain. I had a miscarriage. When I woke up, I opened my eyes and saw Maisie standing by the bed, looking at me with a smug expression on her face. There was nothing but provocation and gloating in her eyes. I finally understood. It was you. You notified my mother-in-law. I struggled to get up, supporting my weak body and questioning her. The corners of her mouth turned up, and she snorted softly. Otherwise, how could that thing in your stomach fall out so quickly? I gasped in shock. This woman was truly cruel. She knew very well that Howard and his mother had always been at odds because his mother had strongly opposed his relationship with Maisie in the beginning. If I can't have it, why should you? The old woman didn't let me be with Howard, so I'll destroy what she's been longing for. Maisie showed that eerie smile again, and it sent shivers down my spine. That was Howard's child too. Don't you love him? Why did you destroy his child? I couldn't help but ask. That was the condition for him to atone for his sins. Since I can't have children, he shouldn't have that thought. Who told him to betray me? Who told him to marry you and ignore my life or death? That's his own fault. I looked coldly at the hideous woman in front of me and felt that she had completely desecrated the pure term, first love. The feeling of disgust came over me. You look down on me too? Seeing me making a vomiting gesture, Maisie was completely enraged. She rushed over and pulled out the tubes on my body. Blood spurted out from the back of my hand and splashed all over her. You should have died long ago. You were lucky last time that you didn't fall to your death. If you died, Howard would never leave me. I woke up with a start, my mind spinning crazily. Suddenly, I remembered that party a year ago. So it was you. I was just about to get up to avoid her, but it was already too late. She quickly stepped forward and frantically grabbed my neck. My weak body was no match for her. Yes. It was me. I pushed you down. I wanted to kill you. If Howard hadn't caught you in time that time, you would have been dead long ago. It's all because of you. As long as you die, no one can break us up. I didn't expect that you could survive falling from such a high staircase. Howard told me clearly that you might not be able to have children anymore. Do you know how happy I was when I heard that news? Finally, you're the same as me. Why can you have children while I can't? No. No. Just when I thought I was going to suffocate, the door was suddenly pushed open. Stop it. Howard rushed over in one stride and pulled the out-of-control Maisie away. Maisie, is what you said true? Did you also try to kill Irene last time? Howard stared at Maisie in disbelief, trying to get a negative answer from her. You clearly told me that it was my mother who accidentally pushed Irene down. How could it be you? My thoughts unconsciously drifted back to that staff party. It was a celebration banquet for Howard's recent promotion to the position of the company's president. My mother-in-law also came. Because of the issue of having children, we had a few words in the lounge. Now that Howard has achieved success and fame, and you've been married for more than 2 years, why is there still no sign of you getting pregnant? My mother-in-law's words made me very unhappy. Plus, I had drunk a little wine, so I retorted, having a baby also requires the cooperation of your son. Having a baby isn't just my business alone. My mother-in-law was a bit angry at that time and was about to come forward to lecture me. I picked up my wine glass and wanted to go downstairs, not wanting to argue with her anymore. Coincidentally, Howard was waving at me downstairs, asking me to go down and greet the guests. I had just lifted my leg to go downstairs when suddenly a heavy push hit my back. I was completely unprepared and rolled down the long staircase. I was seriously injured that time. I was in a coma in the hospital for 3 months. My pubic bone and ribs were all fractured, and my head was severely injured. Most importantly, my pelvis was also damaged. The doctor had told me that it was very likely that I wouldn't be able to conceive a baby normally because of this. More than half a year had passed since my recovery. The explanation I got was that my mother-in-law pushed me because she was momentarily excited. I was wearing high heels and accidentally missed a step, causing both of us to fall to the ground at the same time. However, my mother-in-law landed on top of me at that time, so she wasn't as seriously injured. Because it had been a long time, and it involved my mother-in-law, plus, in the past 6 months, my mother-in-law had been extremely guilty, often feeling that it was her fault that I couldn't get pregnant, and blaming herself every day. Howard had not been in contact with his mother for a long time because of this incident. Naive as I was, I had even spent a lot of effort trying to reconcile them. So when I learned that I was pregnant, I was the first to tell my mother-in-law. Mom, I'm pregnant. My mother-in-law was so excited that she burst into tears on the phone. Irene, actually Mom, don't blame yourself anymore. I don't blame you. Finally having a baby, I wanted to announce my good news to the whole world. But I didn't expect that my mother-in-law also meant well but did something bad. She was so happy that she actually forwarded my WeChat Moments post, and it happened to be seen by Maisie. "It's all because of you. Why did you save her? She was already unconscious at that time, and no one saw it. If you hadn't sent her to the hospital, she would have died for sure that time." Maisie stared at Howard with bloodshot eyes. "You said you would protect me for a lifetime. You said she wouldn't be able to have children anymore. But none of it came true. You married her and even let her get pregnant with your child. I hate it." Maisie kept accusing Howard. "And your mother, she used to treat me like her own daughter. She said she would only recognize me as her daughter-in-law." "Bah! After knowing that I couldn't have children, wasn't she the first one to oppose us? So you pushed my mother down too?" Howard stared at his first love with wide eyes. Perhaps he couldn't believe that the woman he had loved deeply for so many years could have such a cruel heart. "Yes. She deserved to die. Your mother deserved to die even more. She forced you to marry this woman for the sake of carrying on the family line. She cruelly broke us up and ruined my happiness. Maisie, she's my mother." Howard painfully furrowed his brows, as if making a choice. "Anyone who stands in the way of my happiness deserves to die." Maisie then let out a creepy laugh. "Ha ha ha. Your mother wants a precious grandson, right? I won't let her have her way. She ruined my happiness, so I'll ruin her grandson. Ha ha ha." "Maisie, you have such a cruel heart." My mother-in-law's stern voice came from the ward. She slowly walked over, helped me up and let me sit down, and then called the nurse to reinsert my 4-drip. I was half lying down, and a sense of weakness came over me. But it seemed that this drama wasn't over yet. "I've treated you like my own daughter since you were a child. Since I asked you to break up with Howard, I felt guilty and forgiven your mistakes again and again. But I didn't expect that you would try to harm the heir of the Howard family." It turned out that my fall from the building that time had nothing to do with my mother-in-law. At that time, Maisie suddenly appeared behind me and was about to push me. My mother-in-law saw it, but it was too late. To protect me, she had no choice but to pounce on me, and that's how the two of us rolled down the stairs together. Later, to cover up Maisie's crime, my mother-in-law chose to take the blame alone, which caused a rift in Howard's heart. She didn't expect that Maisie would be incorrigible. After learning that I was pregnant, she actually threatened Howard with her life to make me have an abortion. After the truth of the matter became clear, Howard buried his head in his lap and didn't look up for a long time. Soon, the police arrived and took Maisie away in everyone's astonishment. "Was it you who called the police?" Howard finally managed to ask with difficulty. I turned around and gave him a faint glance. "Yes." Maisie immediately turned into a weak little white rabbit, broke free from her restraints, and knelt in front of Howard. "Howard, I was just confused for a moment. I wasn't on purpose. I had drunk a lot of wine at that time and was not in my right mind. I didn't expect this to happen. Howard remained silent, his brows tightly furrowed, and his eyes were full of sadness. Maisie then crawled to my mother-in-law Kylie. "Aunt Kylie, I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. Besides my mother, you've been the one who loves me the most since I was a child. You won't abandon me, right, Aunt Kylie?" My mother-in-law let out a long sigh. "Maisie, this time, Aunt Kylie can't save you. Alas." Maisie never begged for mercy from me from beginning to end. She would only take advantage of the pity of the Howard family members for her, making them intercede for her to get lenient treatment. Unfortunately, now, I'm no longer the daughter-in-law of the Howard family. I no longer have the obligation to consider the face of the Howard family. At this moment, I just want to seek justice for the 6 months I was in a coma and for the child in my stomach. Irene. Howard finally spoke up. I slowly closed my eyes. "Sorry, I'm very tired and need to rest. Notify me when it's time to give my statement." Maisie was arrested according to the law on suspicion of intentional injury. Even if my mother-in-law didn't pursue her crime, the fact that I was in a coma for half a year and almost didn't wake up is there. Moreover, I turned my head to one side and tightly gripped the mobile phone under my pillow. This was the most powerful evidence of Maisie's assault on me. The reason I made this preparation was that on the way to the hospital, when I was in unbearable pain, I vaguely heard the argument between my mother-in-law and Howard. Do you still think Maisie is the first love you used to love deeply? Her heart has long changed. I won't allow you to say that about Maisie, Howard said impatiently. My mother-in-law roared excitedly. You wouldn't be thinking of sending Irene to the hospital where Maisie is staying, would you? I advise you to change to another hospital quickly, or you'll regret it. Howard didn't listen to his mother's advice after all. I endured the pain, wondering why my mother-in-law would say that. Now it has been verified. After learning that I was sent to the hospital, Maisie definitely wouldn't let it go. Her aim was to make me lose my child. But she was greedy. When she saw Howard taking care of me in the ward without even taking off his clothes, she changed her mind. She wanted me to disappear completely. After just dozing off for a while, I felt someone approaching beside me. My vigilance was immediately raised, and I gripped my mobile phone tightly. Irene, are you awake? It was Howard's cautious voice. Sorry. Irene, it's my fault. I'm sorry to you and the child. Later, I'll make it up to you properly. But just now, the police station sent a message. In less than a few hours, Maisie has already attempted suicide 3 times, cut her wrists twice, and lost a lot of blood. I took a sharp breath. Although the man behind me had nothing to do with me anymore, thinking of the child I had just lost, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. Did she lose more blood than I did? I slowly turned around and looked at him expressionlessly. If she was really determined to die, death wouldn't give her so many chances. If I remember correctly, Maisie is a medical student, right? She should know the location of the major arteries. You. How can you be so cold-blooded? Maisie grew up with me since childhood. She's also a life. Isn't my child also a life? I quickly raised my voice to overpower his. Isn't my life also a life? She tried to kill me several times. You covered up for her once. Do you want to cover up for her again? Howard's face turned livid. Maisie wasn't on purpose. She's not that bad. She just what? Because of love turning to hate? On a whim? Premeditated? Howard was left speechless by my rebuttal. His mouth was slightly open, and he shook his head, looking at me in disbelief. Irene, you weren't like this before. Before, you would understand my difficulties and wouldn't be so aggressive. Haha, yes. That's because I loved you. So I loved everything about you and tolerated everything about you. But now, my heart is dead. I have nothing to do with you, and everything about you has nothing to do with me either. On the day of the trial, Howard sat in the audience. My mother-in-law Kylie appeared in court as a witness. I calmly sat in the plaintiff's seat, looking at Maisie, who looked as if she had nothing to live for, gazing mournfully in Howard's direction. Howard was also looking at her with a look of pained and mournful love. Ha! What a pair of bitter lovers! When the judge asked for the witness testimony of that day, my mother-in-law hesitated for a long time. Finally, she chose to remain silent and claimed that she knew nothing. I let out a low laugh, a brilliant one. I should have expected this, but seeing my mother-in-law's expression without a shred of guilt, I was completely enraged. After submitting the recording on my phone, there was an uproar in the audience. Hearing her own maniacal and hideous voice in the recording, Maisie could no longer hold it together. Irene, you wicked woman. You were actually on guard against me all along. I wish I could kill you right now. With that, she struggled vigorously against the restraint of the police officers, going crazy as she tried to break through the fence and attack me. Howard stood in the audience, looking so agitated and at a loss that he could only furrow his brows tightly, observing everything. Howard, it's that woman. She set me up. She's a bad woman. You have to help me, Howard. Maisie was taken away amidst the noise. In the end, she was convicted of intentional injury and sentenced to 7 years in prison. My mother-in-law, for giving false testimony in court, would also face imprisonment ranging from 6 months to a year. Walking out of the courtroom, I looked up at the blue sky and took a deep breath. What a relief. Howard caught up, but was stopped by my lawyer. Anyway, you shouldn't have sued my mother too, should you? She's innocent. Howard shouted from behind me. Maisie has already been given a heavy sentence. Are you satisfied now? I never expected that you would secretly record it, Irene. I really underestimated you. My mother is so old. Do you really have the heart to see her go to prison and suffer? I took another deep breath and turned around to face this clueless man. First, Maisie deserved what she got. It wasn't me who made her break the law. Second, I didn't sue your mother. She gave false testimony in court and showed contempt for the court. You should argue with the judge, not take it out on me. After saying that, I got ready to get into the car without looking back. Back then, when signing the agreement, Howard was so eager that he didn't even read the divorce agreement I drafted carefully. The terms in it didn't really take advantage of him either. There were 2 houses under our names. He got one and I got the other. There were 2 cars, one for each of us. The savings were split evenly between us. I held 15% of the company's shares, and all I had to do was collect dividends every year. Even if I didn't work or do anything in the future, I could live a very comfortable life. Because of this, my mother-in-law came to me personally, saying that she could tell the truth in court on the condition that I give up the company's shares and sell them all to Howard at 20% below the market price. I let out a light laugh. It seemed like her was so blatant that the beads were almost hitting me in the face. Did he ask you to come? I sneered. No, Irene. Mom knows you're feeling aggrieved. You just want to get justice for being framed back then, right? Mom can tell the truth in court. Anyway, it was Maisie who was wrong. Mom won't side with her. Don't worry. The result was predictable. Whether I agreed to transfer the shares or not, my mother-in-law wouldn't tell the truth. She could defend someone who wanted to take my life and the life of her precious grandson. It showed how important that person was in their hearts. Now that Howard and I have signed the divorce papers and the baby in my stomach is gone, everything has settled. To her, I'm just a stranger. Why would she help me or speak up for me? So, I didn't agree and I won't agree. However, I did say, Mom, after this lawsuit is over, I'll talk to Howard about the share transfer. As long as I don't lose out, I won't be that unreasonable. After all, I don't know how to do business. Having the shares in my hand is useless. It doesn't matter who I transfer them to. My mother-in-law beamed immediately, as if she was certain that I would transfer the shares. I just didn't expect that she would give false testimony in court. In fact, as early as a year ago, after I regained consciousness from falling down the stairs, I realized that things couldn't be as simple as my mother-in-law said, that she accidentally bumped into me and I fell, because I clearly felt a heavy push on my back. It couldn't possibly be a light touch from an elderly person. Moreover, on that celebration banquet day, Maisie didn't show up for the first time. I was wondering why she wasn't there on such a glorious moment for Howard. The moment I fell down the stairs, I clearly smelled that familiar perfume behind me. I had smelled that scent on Howard for 3 whole years. If it wasn't her, who else could it be? Afterwards, the Howard family concealed the truth from me. After being discharged from the hospital, I specifically went to check the surveillance footage of that day. I found that Maisie didn't enter through the main entrance because she didn't have an invitation and couldn't get in. Looking more carefully, I discovered that Maisie entered the hall following my mother-in-law. The master of ceremonies thought they were together, so he let her in. Because it was related to the major issue of my possible infertility, I had asked Howard many times to confirm. He always denied that Maisie was not at the scene that night. When I asked my mother-in-law, she just kept blaming herself, saying that she didn't hold me in time and that's why I slipped and fell. Seeing her guilty look, I couldn't bear to pursue it further, and it was left unresolved. Now that the truth has come to light, Howard covered up for Maisie's crime and ignored my life. It was already extremely bad. Now he still has the nerve to seek justice for his mother. Does your promise to my mother still count? Howard was still making his last-ditch effort. Humph. After all is said and done, it's still about the 15% of the shares in my hand. Recently, he has been so busy with Maisie's affairs that he has no time to attend to the company's business. The other directors have been dissatisfied with him for a long time and even had the intention of changing the company's leadership. As the saying goes, business is like war, and the capable ones prevail. On the very night we signed the divorce agreement, some company shareholders had their eyes on the shares in my hand. Howard isn't stupid. Did they really think I was unaware when my mother-in-law came to me? Just out of consideration for our past as husband and wife, I hadn't made up my mind to do something mean, but now I'm going to change my mind. Seeing his unconditional protection of Maisie and his attitude towards me just now, I really don't need to feel any pity for this failed marriage anymore. The moment I got into the car, I picked up my phone and dialed a number. Manager Alan, when would it be convenient for us to discuss the share transfer? Alan, the personnel manager of Howard's company, had a relationship with Howard that was like fire and water in the company. It was him. As soon as he heard that we had parted ways, he couldn't wait to get the shares in my hand. Miss Irene, as long as you're willing to sell all the shares to me, I promise I won't let you lose out. Alan vowed earnestly. I had also done my homework and consulted some industry insiders. Naturally, I wouldn't sell the shares at a loss. When the agreement was halfway signed, Howard showed up at the coffee shop, out of breath. You can't transfer them. Irene. You can't sell the shares to him. Howard looked at me eagerly, as if looking at a passionate lover. This reminded me of Maisie. The unpleasant feeling in my heart surged out immediately. With a burst of courage, I waved my hand grandly and signed my name continuously. Done. When Ellen left with satisfaction, Howard stared at me with a face ashen like death. Irene, what kind of woman are you? Your heart is harder than stone. He gritted his teeth and said, do you know that I have the least number of shares in the company? I could be kicked out of the company at any time. You're just standing by and watching me die. He roared at me, his face flushed red, and his eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. Where was the once charming Howard? Did he die as soon as Maisie went to prison? I looked up at him, expressionless. When you left me alone on the roadside on a freezing cold night just to rush to comfort your first love whose electricity had tripped at home, how soft was your heart? When I was lying in bed with a fever of 40 degrees, begging you not to leave and to pour me a glass of water, you said to me, you're already in your 30s. Don't be so melodramatic, and then left without looking back, just because you had promised your first love that you would go shopping with her to choose some sexy nightgowns that day. How hard was your heart, when I begged you not to harm our child, who was your own flesh and blood, and you said to me, we can have another baby if this one is gone. There's only one Maisie. How hard was your heart? I accused Howard of one crime after another, and before I knew it, I was already in tears. You chose to marry me just so that you could be with Maisie forever, just to deceive others. What did you think of me? What am I to you? She was plotting to take my life. You knew clearly that she wanted to harm me, but you chose to cover up for and connive at a murderer. You even joined forces with her to force my child to death. Why should I be lenient with you? Why should I let her off? Maisie has already received the punishment she deserved. She already knows she was wrong. What more do you want? Why do you have to be so ruthless? Do you know that without these shares, I'll never be able to get back on my feet? Does it have anything to do with me? I looked up coldly. Howard's face twitched, and he was left speechless. I walked quickly out of the coffee shop, not wanting to have anything to do with him anymore. 3 months later, Kylie was released after serving her sentence. She came to me first. Irene, you cruel woman. They say that one night of marriage brings 100 days of kindness. I didn't expect you to be so ruthless, selling the shares to Howard's sworn enemy. Aren't you trying to kill him? Maisie is suffering so much in prison. She's been tortured until she's hardly recognizable. You're so heartless, recording things to harm us. No matter how much she yelled downstairs, I just ignored her. If she got too noisy, I'd just call the property management and have her dragged away. Later, when she came again, the security guards would just drag her away directly. After a few times like this, she didn't dare to come anymore. Later, I heard that Howard was accused of dereliction of duty at a shareholders' meeting, ignoring the company's performance and causing certain economic losses to the company. He was removed from the board of directors and transferred to a remote city to start from a small sales job. Maisie always protested by attempting suicide in prison. Each time, she was almost successful. After many times, the prison guards got tired of it and stopped paying attention to her. Finally, one time, she chose to cut her throat to protest. She thought that with her medical knowledge, she wouldn't hurt herself. But as the saying goes, those who play with fire will get burned. It was this time that made her pay the price. She accidentally cut her vocal cords and could never speak again. I sold the house I got from the divorce. With less than half of the money, I bought an old house with a courtyard in the suburbs of a neighboring city. After continuous renovations, it became my dream house. In this dream house, I plant flowers, raise cats and dogs, and live a very comfortable life.